Today I wanted to cover hostile mobs in Minecraft. Most of them are really well designed and fit their role perfectly, and some of them do not. First, let's sort of review the base mobs, starting with the zombie. The zombie is Minecraft's basic mob. It's sort of its equivalent of a Goomba. I mean, I can't really stomp on its head, but it fills a very important role of being the standard mob. It is extremely dangerous when up close. In small numbers, they're extremely easy to deal with. In large numbers, they become much harder, or in close quarters, they become very difficult to deal with. It's why a zombie spawner is quite a bit harder to attack than just, random zombies that you would see out in the wilderness if it were nighttime, which it will be soon. Their balance on the risk-reward scale has degraded somewhat in recent patches because they no longer drop feathers, which are useful for making arrows. They now drop rotten flesh, which isn't really that useful at all. On the annoyance versus tension scale, zombies do really well, and I think I need to explain in some depth what I mean by this concept. What I mean by this is that a mob needs to be balanced based on how hard it is to defeat, how long it takes to defeat, how it affects you in the game. Either, if it poisons you, that is something that might be an annoyance, or it might be something that's very tense. We've all seen games where there are mobs that are bullet sponges, where, your victory is pretty much inevitable, meaning they're not a threat to you, but they just take a lot of time to defeat. So you're sitting there shooting, strafing around, and you're like, gosh, I wish this guy was dead. That's a case where the annoyance versus tension elements are out of balance. Zombies do really well on this front. Normally, they're not hard to defeat. They're extremely easy to avoid most of the time, but when you get into those certain situations where you do have to engage them directly, or you are surprised by them, they can really hurt you, and it just feels right. Another aspect I want to look at, which is somewhat unique to Minecraft, is what I'm going to call controllability. Even in survival modes, Minecraft is still full of creative aspects, and one of those is, taking control of the natural environment, which is quite hostile, and making it your own. And part of this is controlling what appears where. For example, zombies would spawn out here right now, but if I were to light it up, they wouldn't. Zombies do really well on this sort of controllability index, because if an area is above a certain light level, they just simply don't spawn. Most mobs are this way, but not all. This is somewhat related to the concept in, especially some older games, where you've seen it where you advance one screen in an old 2D scrolling game, and then you go back one screen, and all of a sudden all those mobs you killed just immediately appear. Or even if it's just you go like 2 pixels off and they come back. That sort of thing is frustrating. And when a mob doesn't have a certain level of controllability, meaning you can't keep it out of certain environments, it impacts the game negatively. Zombies do really well on all these points. If I were to change anything, I might give them some additional drop that is at least somewhat useful. Possibly something for a potion mixture in the future. I don't know. Another problem that occurs in multiplayer is that it's really hard to engage a zombie without taking damage if you're going to melee them. But it doesn't happen on single player. This is not that big of a problem because video games are full of examples of mobs that are exclusively engaged at ranged or best engaged at range. The kamikaze guys holding the bombs from Serious Sam. You don't want to be close to them when you're fighting them. Next up is the skeleton. It's the only ranged attacker in the normal world. As for risk versus reward, they're reasonably easy to defeat in small numbers, and in large numbers they can become quite a bit tougher, especially in certain terrain environments where they can get a lot of open shots and you don't have a lot of protection. But they also drop a lot of goodies. They drop arrows, which are extremely useful to have, and they drop bones, which can be converted to bone meal, which allow you to grow things instantly. I would say the gameplay designers need to decide whether the rewards from a skeleton are balanced or the rewards from a zombie are balanced, because they are not balanced relative to each other, but they should be. On the annoyance versus tension scale, they do really well. They offer you some tense moments, like when they surprise you out of the darkness, there's just an arrow coming forward. They're also not a particularly annoying enemy. They don't take a lot of hits, they don't blow up terrain around you, they just are balanced. Their controllability is the same as zombies. Anywhere where the light level is above 7, they won't spawn. Next up is the black spider. It's one of a few mobs in the game that can climb. It's also only 1 block tall, so it can fit in certain crannies you wouldn't be able to fit a zombie through. They have the same health as zombies in 1.8, which is mostly what I'm reviewing. In 1.9, they've lost a couple of hearts, I believe. They also do less damage than zombies, so they're not as dangerous on that front, but they do have the ability to surprise you due to their special movement characteristics. As a reward, they used to be the only place to get string. Now with abandoned mine shafts, you can get it from the cobwebs and cave spiders, but on the surface, it's the only place to get string for your bow or your fishing pole. On the annoyance versus tension scale, they do really well. There are a lot of tense moments due to the climbing ability where you hear them, you wander through not knowing where they are, you look up, there's a spider right there, and it jumps on you. Wonderful moments of gaming. They're not that hard to kill as far as number of hits with a sword. All in all, very balanced on that aspect. They have the same spawning rules as skeletons and zombies. Any light level below 7, they will spawn. One additional caveat is because they can climb, you need to have a particular arrangement to walls so they won't be able to get up in there. All in all, still very controllable. Now that we've gone over a couple of mobs that are really quite well balanced, let's look at one that is not. Because pigmen are non-hostile by default, you never really feel tense seeing one on the horizon like you would, say, a creeper. What this means is that any interaction you have with them that's negative will be annoying by default. Alright, here we are in the Nether, on our lovingly crafted railway here. Let's see what happens when we try to use it. Oh wait, I get knocked back because there's pigmen everywhere. This kind of thing could happen in the normal world if you didn't properly light up your railway, but in the Nether, there's nothing you can do about it. Unlike most of the mobs in the normal world, pigmen will spawn at any light level. So what this ends up doing is it stifles creativity. You can't have a rail like this in the Nether and have it function that well. I mean, there's a good chance you might be able to get through a couple times without running into any pigmen, and you could have the ceiling low enough that they can't spawn, but there's a chance they could wander in through some direction, and it just is damaging to the gameplay experience. Alright, let's move on to the Ghast. It certainly fills a unique role, being the only flying enemy in the game and the only one with a ranged explosive attack. One problem with Ghast is that when you kill them, there's a very good chance that if they do happen to drop a couple pieces of gunpowder, or in pre-release as a gas tier, it might end up in an area you can't reach or may fall straight into lava anyway, so the reward is usually not worth it. Like pigmen, Ghasts also will spawn at any light level in the Nether, and you have no real way to deter them from spawning. Combat with a Ghast can be quite tense. They don't really do as much damage as they probably should, at least that's been my experience. But they're also very common in the Nether, and they stifle creativity in a way that no other mob in the game does. Let's take another trip back to the Nether. Alright, we have spawned in the Nether, and now we are immediately on fire. Let's talk about why this is a problem. Notch invested a lot of time in creating the Nether. You know, the math that makes this large lava lake, these open caverns, and these floaty little island bits. And as a player, you might creatively say, I want to build a sandstone castle here. You really can't, because Ghasts will blow it up. It's even worse than just stifling creativity. It takes away from your ability to actually experience the Nether, because in order to safely travel through it, you essentially spend your whole life digging a 2x1 chasm through everything. What this does is it transforms the Nether from a place to explore and experience into a place you suffer through to get from point A to point B, because it happens to be a little faster. This is already running a little long, so let's just go over each and every mob quickly and suggest any changes that might be needed. First up is the Creeper. The Creeper is very well balanced. It doesn't really need any changes. If anything, it should drop a little bit more gunpowder. The Skeleton, as we mentioned before, may need to have its drops adjusted downward in quality to match up with the other mobs in the game. The Spider needs no changes at all. The Zombie needs slightly better drops. Slimes need to be a little more dangerous. Silverfish are fine as they are. There need to be more strongholds in the world so that you encounter them more often, but a very well balanced mob otherwise. Cave spiders need to drop better stuff. Endermen should be significantly more rare and significantly harder to defeat. The player needs a way to control ghast spawning. I would do this by using record players. Record players require diamonds, which is a somewhat significant investment, and records are reasonably hard to find, and if you put a record into a record player, not necessarily playing music, but it would keep gas away from the area you're trying to work in. Pigmen, on the other hand, I would remove entirely. They aren't a threat to your existence in the Nether, they just sort of get in the way, and I don't feel they mesh stylistically with the pre-release Nether mobs. If you're really fond of the skin and the sound effects, I guess you could redeploy the model as some sort of slightly tougher zombie variant that only spawns under certain conditions. But as for the Nether, I don't think they have a reason to be there. I'm not going to go over any of the pre-release mobs because I feel that they are still in a state of flux and the designers haven't fully fleshed them out as to what they intend them to be. So that is it for this episode. I will see you later.